tore a pec muscle last night against Houston. He'll miss the rest of the year. The Seattle Mariners are on fire. 9 straight wins, and they start the day a half game ahead of Houston in the West. The next 6 games are on the road and critical. 3 games with KC starts today at 4:40. Logan Gilbert is on the mound.
Live from the Coors Light Studios, it's time for the Rip City Drive, hosted by the crazy and often irrational Chad Doing. Coors Light, mountain cold refreshment. Choose chill.
I feel very confident in Jake. I think Jake has proven his caliber in this league and that he can help us win football games and contend for all the things that we want to contend for. With that being said, we're always open to bringing in other people at this point. We got 2 quarterbacks sitting in this room. And so I'm sure we'll turn over a lot of rocks trying to find another guy.
Pete, there was a report that Tom Brady meets 3 times a week or so with Chip Kelly, goes over film with him. We saw him up in the booth with a headset on. I just was curious your thoughts on that level of participation with Tom Brady.
Yeah, that's not accurate. That's not accurate. That's not accurate. We have conversations. I talk to Tom. Chip talks to Tom regularly. I mean, we have a tremendous asset, and so and we all get along well, and we respect each other, and so we just talk, about life and football and whatever it comes, and he has great insight. So we're lucky to have him as an owner.
Strap in. The Rip City Drive with Chad Doing starts now.
And they run 4. Herbert has all day in the pocket. Takes a shot downfield. 2 wide open. Caught. Quentin Johnson. Touchdown. Chargers. 60-yard touchdown. Herbert to Q.
2nd and 9 at the Bucs 25. Stroud under center. Handoff Chubb again up the middle. 20. Angling right. 15. 10. 5. Touchdown. Houston. Chubb to the house. And the Texans lead Tampa Bay.
Mayfield sends him back in motion. Hands the ball off. Rashad White into the end zone. Is he in? Is he in? Touchdown Tampa Bay. Touchdown Tampa Bay. Buccaneers take the lead at 20-19.
All right, what's going on, my friends? Rip City Drive, Chad Doing here. I hope you're enjoying your Monday. Or is it Monday? No, wait a second. It's Tuesday. I was off yesterday. So it feels like Monday, but I'm back and ready to get things going. We got a big show today. We're going to talk a lot of football. I've got Alex Brink, our college football and NFL insider, former Washington State Cougar, getting all geared up for the Apple Cup. He'll join the show at 5:20. And then at 4:20, the Godfather, Dwight Jaynes, is going to stop by. And we'll focus in on the Oregon State Beavers and head coach Trent Bray, and also get his thoughts on some of the details that he's picked up on the Portland Trail Blazers' new owners. So if you want to reach out to me, you know how to do so. You'll find me on X at Chad and Rip City. You can call the show and be a part of it and talk with me right now at 503-248-0620, 503-248-0620. And, of course, you can always listen live and podcast the show via our free iHeartRadio app. And join us on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com. You can pull up our homepage, Rip City Radio 620, and be able to take part in the live stream. And if you want to text me direct, I'll just give you my phone number right now, 360-281-5473. I was down in Tempe over the weekend. I had a chance to take in some college football with Arizona State and Texas State and enjoyed some very warm temperatures. Not as bad as I thought. Temperatures in the high 90s, but not in triple digits, which is a good thing. But a lot of blue skies and sunshine. Had a chance to hook up with my best friend Steve, who I had not seen in about 8 months. So we had a good weekend, watched a lot of football, and had a chance to hang out and watch NFL on Sunday. But it's great to be back, and a lot of different things I want to talk about. With Oregon State, who are now getting prepared for the Civil War coming up on Saturday against the Ducks, early kickoff, 12 o'clock, down at Autzen. It's going to be on the Big Ten Network and, of course, on your home of the Beavs, 1190 KEX with Mike Parker. Pregame show will kick off at 10. I'll be down at Spirit Mountain Casino for the rivalry game party, the Civil War party, which is one of the best of the year in the Event Center. Half orange, half green, great food service, screens everywhere. If you're not going to the game at Autzen, I would encourage you to join me at Spirit Mountain Casino. I'll be hosting the events. It's going to be a lot of fun. Always look forward to that. That and Super Bowl are like my 2 favorite things to host. And so I'm pumped up for this weekend, even though the game looks like it's going to be a disaster. But with Trent Bray, and I'll get more into this, I feel for him right now. And my question would be, for the team they just played on Saturday, Texas Tech, how much money outside of quarterback did Oregon State invest in their roster? I would be willing to bet that Texas Tech, who right now has the number one defensive line in terms of performance and grade through the first 3 weeks of the regular season, they probably invested more in their defensive line than Oregon State did in their entire roster. I think now you're getting a good idea of why Jonathan Smith jumped on the opportunity to go to Michigan State. And people ask, well, why would he do that? It's Michigan State. Well, because you're going to a school that's a part of a legitimate conference that has many more resources to be able to build a team, pay your coaches, and have a roster that can compete. That's really what it comes down to. And I think for Trent Bray, and I underestimated the talent level going into the year. I think I focused too much on their quarterback, but I underestimated the lack of talent across the board on the roster, both on the offensive and defensive lines, the overall lack of depth. You just don't have the quality of players that you need to be able to compete against teams like Texas Tech, Oregon, or heck, even Cal. Now, the good news is for them, the schedule after this weekend is going to lighten up significantly. But I'm looking at the roster and I'm seeing these guys. I don't know what they have to compete against the teams that are on their schedule. So it's a talent issue. And when you don't have the resources to be able to stockpile talent and have a legitimate roster, it's going to be an issue. And so I think for Trent Bray, two things are working against him right now. When he took over the job, there was an overall lack of experience in terms of being a head coach. He had never had that role before. And being a coordinator or being a defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator or any type of an assistant, it's not the same as being the head coach of a college football program. There's so much more to the job than just being a coach and drawing up X's and O's. Not to mention the fundraising that you have to pour yourself into now to be able to compete. So it's brutal. So I think for Trent Bray, it's going to be a very difficult season. I think the key for him, as I said last week, is to make sure that he keeps the guys in that locker room together. And we're going to find out everything we need to know about Coach Bray throughout the course of the next, 4 to 5 weeks. It is possible that he's in over his head. He would not be the first coordinator hired to be a head coach, and it didn't work out in his first chance. It's quite possible. Not to mention he was taking over a program that was all of a sudden out of a conference, had no real clear idea of what the future was going to look like, and lost a bunch of players when Jonathan Smith took off from Michigan State. And so you're seeing the retooling. You're seeing what's happening with players who have defected, and you're trying to build and start with a bunch of new guys. It's very difficult to do. He could be in over his head, but I would argue who in the country right now could step in with the type of talent they have on that roster and compete? I don't know. But I can tell you one thing, they're not anywhere near the level of Texas Tech, and they're certainly nowhere near the level of Oregon. So we'll see how things continue to shake out. But we'll dive in more with the Godfather, Dwight Jaynes, on Trent Bray. Now, the other things that jumped out were just the games. And I want to go to what we saw last night in both games. Doubleheader on Monday Night Football. Not a big fan of the doubleheader on Monday Night Football, but I'll take 2 football games on a Monday night anytime I can get it. I'm not sure why ESPN or ABC or whoever it is that makes those decisions. Is it that hard to find a group of guys who can handle the broadcast booth in that second game? Like, is it that hard? And what was wrong with Chris Fowler last night? He was either under the weather or just bored and completely disinterested in the guys he was working with. But he was very monotone, no energy in his voice. Chris Fowler normally is great, so I'm assuming he was a little bit under the weather. But the broadcast, not great. But, I mentioned this a couple of years ago. When the Chargers went out and finally ponied up the jack to pay for a head coach in Jim Harbaugh, it was a change in the way they had always done business. The Chargers, for years, had been much like the Bengals, very cheap, not wanting to pay their coaches, not wanting to invest in a legitimate head coach. And for years, they paid the price for it. Because when you go cheap and you try to go the generic route or the off-brand route, sometimes it'll come back to bite you. Now, as I pointed out, and my Nana used to send me clippings from her Consumer Reports magazines, There are certain things you can get by without getting the big name brand. Batteries would be one of them. You do not need the big name brand batteries to have them work and function for a long period of time. But when it comes to coaches in the NFL, you do need the right guy. And sometimes you got to pay big money. Jim Harbaugh was a genius hire because he has proven anywhere he goes, whether it's San Diego or it's Stanford or it's Michigan or it's the 49ers or in this case the Chargers, all he does is win games. He's a bit kooky. He's very competitive. He might have cheated a little bit in college, but the guy wins, and he knows how to set up a foundation. He knows how to build a team, and look at the Chargers now. I said when they hired him, it was just a matter of time until he had the Chargers in a Super Bowl. And I think what we saw last night against the Raiders, coming off the win over the Chiefs, and they're getting ready for a big game at home against Denver. It's kind of a sandwich game. But what I'm seeing with that team is a defense that is athletic and very physical at the point of attack. The secondary was absolutely locked down. They frustrated Geno Smith all night. And on offense, they're starting to unleash Justin Herbert. They're going to run the football, and they're going to use their offensive line, and they want to be physical in their run game. But I'll tell you what else they want. They want Justin Herbert to lead that team. And now that you're getting more of Harbaugh type of guys in their system, look at what you're getting. And they still need help at receiver. You know, they need to add a couple of more pieces here and there, but they're on the right path. I love their mentality. I love the way they play. And when you've got a guy like Justin Herbert, you know you've got a chance in every single game. But their defense last night was suffocating. But the mentality that Jim Harbaugh brings and that he demands from his players, like it just oozes out of him. And I thought Justin Herbert, you know, every game's different. He was the big playmaker against Kansas City in the opener, but sometimes games call for the quarterback just to make the right decision, don't put the ball in harm's way, and allow your defense to win the game. And I thought last night we saw that from the Chargers. And Justin Herbert was just terrific, and he had a chance to talk after the game.
To be the team that we want to be, we're going to have to go play in hostile environments, away from our crowd, away from our fans, and I thought our team has done a good job handling that adversity and dealing with it. And whether it's a really loud stadium or crowd, just being able to work through that for sure.
Yeah, Justin Herbert's great. He's going to be fine. The Chargers are a legitimate threat, and they're undefeated and sit atop the AFC West at 2-0. The Kansas City Chiefs are 0-2. Both the Raiders and the Broncos are 1-1. But the Chargers are off to a great start. I've got a lot of thoughts on Baker Mayfield, who was wheeling and dealing last night. That last drive was ridiculous, but he showed toughness. There were a couple of times where I thought he was going to get hauled off the field in a cart, but he continued to get up and continued to battle. I'm a big fan of Baker Mayfield. That guy's got a lot of moxie. And I do have thoughts on Tom Brady and the conflict of interest. And I don't care what the NFL says. What he's doing right now as a minority owner with the Raiders, knowing how competitive he is and the production meetings he gets to participate in as a broadcaster on the number one team for Fox, it's a conflict of interest. And it's a bad look. And Tom Brady is a known cheater and a very competitive man. Don't you think he might share any information with the Raiders that could be beneficial to their team, since he does have a minority stake in the club? I'm going to go with a yes on that. All right, we'll come back. I want to share some thoughts on Baker. We'll get to Tom Brady, the Godfather at 4:20, and then Alex Brink talking ball at 5:20. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, this is awesome. Duke, the UPS driver, he's a big Giant fan. I converted him last year into a Cam Scattaboo fan when he was making a run at the Heisman at Arizona State. He's one of my favorite college football players of all time. I love watching him play. He scored his first NFL touchdown this past weekend against Dallas, and he had a couple of sweet, sweet runs that were reminiscent of his time at Arizona State. What I always appreciated about Cam Scattaboo is his hunger in which he ran with and his unwillingness to go down, the contact balance, and just the overall toughness. He was a workhorse. And it was great because when I was at the game on Saturday, I sat next to a couple of older gentlemen. And the guy right next to me, his name was Howard. And these guys, when I say old, I mean like they were old. But I respect them. They both lived in Scottsdale. But this one guy, not Howard, but the gentleman next to him, I can't remember his name, but he went to the very first game that Arizona State played at their stadium, Sun Devil Stadium, back in like 58. And he's been going ever since. So it was pretty cool to talk to him, but they were both mentioning Scattaboo and how much they missed him and how much they enjoyed the way that he ran. And that's, what Duke, the UPS driver, loves about him being on the Giants. Just the toughness. But again, players can make a way for themselves in the NFL. The one thing that Scattaboo does really well is blitz pickup. Part of the reason why coaches in the NFL don't want to play young running backs, especially on third down, is they can't trust them in pass protection. And part of their job is not just to run the football, but also to pass protect for blitz pickup. It's critical. And Scattaboo's a tough son of a gun, and he gets after it. Now, Duke, the UPS driver, also on a mission himself. He just sent me a before and after. He is now up to 50 pounds lost. And I asked him how he felt, and he sent me a picture of the before and after. And it's one of those classic, miserable pictures before, but lean, mean, and feeling good in the after. So props to Duke, man. I love those individual stories of success, especially when it comes to, getting yourself into better shape. I understand the challenges when it comes to food intake and how hard it is for people to lose weight, because everything we do, no matter where you're at or what you're doing, food or beverage is somehow attached to it. You go to someone's house, they have food or beverage. You go out, you're usually going out for food or beverage. You go to a game, you go to this, you go to that. It's just the way our country is set up. We love food. And I know that's true because I think the latest number I saw, I think 77% of the country is obese. And that's not good. So I asked him, how do you feel, man? What do you notice with, dropping 50 lbs? Stamina, energy, and just a lot more activity. So I love that, man. Props to you, Duke. Duke, the UPS guy out there getting it done. And Cam Scattaboo getting it done for the Giants. And, what I'm seeing early on from Scat, he's doing exactly what I thought. He's just going to find a way to get on the football field because the coaches will continue to see, hey, this guy, he's good in blitz pickup. He's great in short yardage. We can use him in goal line. He can catch the football. We can use him on special teams. There's just different ways you can plug in these all-purpose guys, which I think is great. And I love seeing young guys getting an opportunity to play. But, again, when you bring toughness and smarts and an understanding of the game as a rookie, coaches feel a lot better about you, which is cool. The other game, we talked about the Chargers and Raiders. I thought the Raiders operation, just like I thought in week 1 against New England, and we saw it last night, Pete Carroll has got this franchise on the right track. Now, their offense struggled last night. Geno Smith struggled to get the football downfield. Most of his success was underneath the coverage. But I don't really look at that as an indictment of how bad the Raiders' offense is. I just think the Chargers' defense was sensational last night. And they put the clamps on and did not allow the Raiders to get in the end zone. It was a great defensive performance. Now, the Chargers, they better figure out how to close games. They kept trying to give the game back. They had this brain cramp where they went for it at midfield on 4th down and got stopped, which put the Raiders back in the game. Their offense couldn't do anything with it. And then they fumbled the football on their next possession, once again giving the Raiders life, but their defense bailed them out. And I'm just telling you, when you do that against more competent teams, especially on offense, you're going to pay a price. So the Chargers need to get better at closing out games. But outside of that, they are on the right track. I don't know if it's this year or if it's next year or if it's 2 years from now, but Jim Harbaugh will have them in the Super Bowl. That's how much I believe in him. Just his coaching, his understanding of how to build a football team from the inside out, and the toughness that we're seeing from that team on both sides of the ball at the line of scrimmage. It's impressive. Very impressive. And the Chargers able to get the win. They're now 2-0, and they got the big game coming up on Sunday at home against the Denver Broncos. Now, in the other game, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were looking to move to 2-0 coming off their Week 1 win against Atlanta. The Houston Texans were coming off a Week 1 loss to the Rams. They're playing at home in their first game of the year, and they need a win to even up their record. And it was a defensive slugfest. Both teams got after it defensively. And the Houston Texans, their offensive line, they're trying to sort through some issues there, but their defensive line is nasty, and their edge rushers were getting after Baker all night long. And so it was a very tight game at halftime at 14-10, and the Texans continued to battle, and after a blocked punt, finally able to get in the end zone.
2nd and 9 at the Bucs 25, Stroud under center. Handoff Chubb again, up the middle, 20, angling right, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Houston! Chubb to the house, and the Texans lead Tampa Bay.
19-14 at that point. They went for 2 and did not get it, and Baker was able to have 2 minutes on the clock to try and get downfield. You know what's amazing to me? These NFL teams that move the ball up and down the field all day, they have no idea how to convert on a 2-point try. None of them do. It's like, what are you guys doing? Do you understand how to get in the end zone? I guess it's because of the compressed area. They just don't have enough space, and defenses are too good. They can't do it. But I wondered if that 2-point conversion fail might come back to cost him, and it did. Baker Mayfield had an incredible scramble run on 4th down and put his team in position, and Rachaad White took care of the rest.
Mayfield sends him back in motion. Hands the ball off. Rachaad White into the end zone. Is he in? Is he in? Touchdown Tampa Bay! Touchdown Tampa Bay! Buccaneers take the lead at 20-19.
And they got the win. 20-19, the final. After the game, the Bucs head coach Todd Bowles talked about Baker's playmaking.
That was a heck of a job of situational football. Really, Baker on the 4th and 10, using his legs to get the first down. That kind of catapulted everything from there. Everything we practiced, everything we've talked about, and everything we've done about finishing the ball game, they did a heck of a job finishing.
Yeah, there you go. Baker Mayfield, one of those players like Geno Smith, who started out his career in Cleveland, Geno with the Jets. You start out with horrific franchises that try to destroy you, and then you're given a second chance, and you make the most of it. And Baker Mayfield has matured. He's obviously accurate with the football. He's not the greatest athlete, but he's got enough movement with his feet to be able to avoid the rush at times. Had a couple of great scrambles last night. And he's been one of the best quarterbacks in football since he went to Tampa Bay. So credit to Baker for the maturity, also for the way that he's continued to show toughness in battle. And when you have a quarterback like that that's tough, that makes plays, puts you in a position to win, and can lead you on a 2-minute drill to get the victory like that, his teammates are going to love him. And so I just respect the way Baker goes about his business. The weird part is, if you look at the Cleveland Browns, who, of course, based on schedule, I knew they were going to get off to a bad start. They're 0-2 now with back-to-back losses to the Bengals and the Ravens. And they've got the Packers coming up at home this weekend. The crazy part about Cleveland, and this is how you know a franchise is terrible, they have a championship-caliber defense. Can you imagine what the Browns would look like if they had Baker Mayfield at quarterback? Oh, wait, they gave up on him. See, that's what bad franchises do. They misread the situation, or sometimes they draft the wrong guy, they don't develop properly, or they jump too quick on a guy and make the wrong decision. And now look at them. They have Joe Flacco, they have Dylan Gabriel, and they have Shedeur Sanders. In other words, a total mess. But Baker Mayfield, now that he's with a more legitimate franchise, is thriving. And I'd love to see it. Baker Mayfield's great. And the Buccaneers are going to be a significant threat in the NFC. And they're one of those teams, based on the division they play in and the schedule that they have, that could be threatening for one of the top seeds in that conference. So we'll see how things continue to shake out. I don't think the Bucs are the best team in the NFC, but I'll tell you what, come playoff time, if you have to go into their building and hope to get a win, it's going to be tough because they're very opportunistic on defense. They've done a great job over the last couple of years of really building up their run game, and they're a better running team now. And you got Baker Mayfield, who is playing under control, making good decisions, not turning it over, and being accurate. And there's continuity with the front office and the coaching staff there. And look at what's going on. They're reaping the benefits. But Baker Mayfield showed toughness last night. And I like his moxie. And credit to him. If you can survive Cleveland, if you can survive playing for the Browns and then be able to thrive coming out of that, that tells me everything I need to know about you. We'll ask Alex Brink what he thinks about Baker. But I saw toughness last night, which was great. Now, with the Raiders, controversy surrounding Tom Brady, which is very interesting to me. Now, Tom Brady is a minority owner in the Raiders. He is also on the number one broadcast team with Fox, the NFL on Fox. He's with Kevin Burkhardt, Aaron Andrews, and he got thrust into the number one role. He's a big name, and they're paying him a lot of money. Now, originally, he was not allowed to take part in any of the production meetings because teams, and understandably so, did not want to have anybody on their premises who is an owner with another NFL team that might use information that could come back to haunt them in the future. That seems very reasonable. Well, this year, they have relaxed some of the restrictions on Brady to where now he can take part in production meetings, not at the team facility, but he can do it virtually. He can also meet with players and coaches off-site. So he can meet them face-to-face, and then according to the NFL, what each individual from whichever team, whatever they decide to disclose is up to them. I think it's a major conflict of interest. I think it's a bad look for the NFL. And the reason why this is a story today is that we saw it on the broadcast last night. Tom Brady was up in the booth with the coaches with a headset on. How many other minority owners do you know that have a headset on in the booth? Well, what I think it is that Tom Brady, ultra competitive, wants to be a winner, and is looking to find footing in his post-playing career. And I think he loves the idea of being an owner. And we know Tom Brady has been a part of a cheating franchise before with the Patriots. You don't have to put the blame on Brady. Belichick obviously had a fascination with filming and using technology to film the opposing team, even teams that he probably didn't need that information from. We know about Deflategate. All I'm saying is with Tom Brady is this. How could a competitive guy like Brady not share information he might obtain in these production meetings with his franchise if proven to be beneficial? So, of course, not only is it a bad look, but I do think it's a conflict of interest. It's like be an owner or be a broadcaster. But he's trying to do both. And now the NFL, because they so desperately want Brady involved because of what he means to the league and the player he was, they're relaxing some of these restrictions. I am surprised that we don't hear more uproar from the owners around the league because they, too, have power. They, too, are very competitive. And I can't imagine that some of them are down. So I want to know what type of closed-door meetings with deals are being done to make sure that Brady has some access so he can continue to broadcast and do a good job for Fox. But Pete Carroll, he was asked about it, and he got a little chippy after the game last night. Here's Pete. Take a listen to the Q&A.
There was a report that Tom Brady meets 3 times a week or so with Chip Kelly, goes over film with him. We saw him up in the booth with a headset on. I just was curious your thoughts on that level of participation with Tom Brady.
Yeah, that's not accurate. That's not accurate. That's not accurate. We have conversations. I talk to Tom. Chip talks to Tom regularly. I mean, we have a tremendous asset, and so and we all get along well, and we respect each other, and so we just talk, about life and football and whatever it comes, and he has great insight. So we're lucky to have him as an owner.
See, I love Pete saying that's not accurate. In the report I read, it was Chip Kelly who actually said that he talks to Tom Brady a few times a week, and they talk about the offense. I'm telling you what, if I'm Chip Kelly, I'm absolutely talking to Tom Brady and going over the game plan. why wouldn't you pick his brain for the upcoming opponent? And if Tom Brady has any information about a future opponent that he's had a chance to gather information on because he was in a production meeting, why wouldn't he share that with Chip Kelly? I know it's weird. But regardless, of course, if I'm Chip Kelly, why wouldn't you want to break film with Tom Brady? One of the best to ever do it. That's like his strength. I would definitely want to get his input if he's willing to do it. Tom Brady could help you game plan. And having that type of experience, his set of eyes on a defense and what you might want to look to include in the game plan, it makes perfect sense to me. Absolutely. So we'll see how things continue to shake out. But I don't know. The way I see this going in the future is that something will happen or something will be said, and there'll be more controversy surrounding Brady's access. And I think it's going to be because some owners are not going to be down. And we'll see how things continue to shake out. But if I'm Chip Kelly, why wouldn't you ask Tom Brady, hey, what do you think about this play? What are you seeing here with this defense? How should we attack that? If he's got the time and wants to do it, why wouldn't you tap into that brain? It would be malpractice to have access to Tom Brady and not utilize him in helping you prepare because he's seen everything and he knows how to attack certain players, certain formations, whatever the case may be. Geno Smith, 3 picks last night. You could see it at the end of the game after multiple opportunities were failed by the Raider offense. He was frustrated. Here he is after the game.
Spot decision-making, especially the ones where he took shots downfield. Can you just sort of summarize what took place and where you were at, in the game at the moment in taking those shots, especially the ones that got picked?
Yeah, the first play of the game was a play that, we designed. We, had an open guy, led him a little bit too far out front. Ball gets tipped up, gets interception. A play that, obviously you want to have those plays back. You can't. I mean, it's the reality of it. Took a shot to Dante, before the half. I thought he had a safety on him, thought he had a shot. I gave him a chance. Obviously, didn't work out in our favor. And then, the one to Jacoby, had a DB with his back turned. They were playing Tampa 2. Thought I could fit it in there. Obviously, we need to score 7 points in that situation. A field goal would have helped us, but, 7 points would have put us in a better position. Ball gets tipped up again. I thought I put it in a decent spot where our guy can make a play. Ball gets tipped up. They make a play on it, and, we don't get points.
All right, there's Geno Smith. Very accountable. I like his character and what he's about. But I think Geno Smith, that's what you get with a good quarterback but not a great quarterback. With Geno, and Pete knows this, you have to be able to run the football and open up the opportunities in play action for Geno to have success. But if he's in a situation like he faced last night with the Chargers where you're behind and you can't run the ball and they know you're going to throw it, that's not where his strength is at. And the Chargers secondary blanketed the Raider receivers, and they're able to tee off on Geno, and he had issues with it last night with multiple turnovers. But credit the Chargers with their aggressiveness, their defense, and the way they play because they're the ones who forced the issue last night. But the Raiders are going to be fine. Pete Carroll knows what he's doing, and you can't turn it all around in 2 games. It's going to take some time, but at least you have direction. It's no longer a rudderless ship. And Pete Carroll, a lot of energy, and he's going to continue to work relentlessly to get that team on track. All right, we'll keep things rolling. I will get to Brian Kelly's meltdown and apology after the game. I saw it in real time, so the meltdown was terrific coming off the win over Florida. He's a great coach, somewhat douchey, very arrogant, and he might be an a-hole, but I do enjoy the meltdown. And, again, I think this came from a good place because he was trying to defend his players. All right, Rip City Drive, Chad Doing on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, a couple of events coming up on Friday. We're going to be out in Gresham for the Rip City Rally. I think the rally's official time is 4 to 6 in the afternoon. And I'm going to be broadcasting live from 3 until 6. And then on Sunday, I'll be down at the Damian Lillard Rip City Rally from noon until 2 right there at Pioneer Courthouse Square. So I would encourage you to join us on Sunday afternoon from noon until 2 as we welcome Dame back to Rip City. He's going to be out there. He'll speak to the crowd, and we'll celebrate the return of Dame. So Friday, Rip City Rally in Gresham, and then Sunday, noon to 2 at Pioneer Courthouse Square for the Damian Lillard reunion rally in Portland, which is going to be great. So we get a chance to welcome Dame back. And that's coming off the Civil War. There'll be NFL games going on, but you can squeeze in. You can get the morning action in, squeeze in Dame's rally, and then be back home in time for the second half of the afternoon action in the NFL. So there you have it. There you have it. The Godfather, Dwight Jaynes, is going to join the show coming up at 4:20. And I want to talk about Trent Bray with him and just get his take on what he's seeing with the program right now. It's been a rough go with the Beavs this year, and that's putting it mildly. They are winless on the season. They look like a team that lacks talent, that lacks discipline, and a bunch of young players out there who are just struggling to get it done. One thing we'll talk about with the Godfather, I was talking with him earlier as I was on my way to the station today, and he brought up a good point. If you're Trent Bray and you see a coach get fired and you know that opens up that, window period in the portal for the players, shouldn't you be scouring the rosters for somebody that can do a long snap? Somebody that can get the ball back to the punter or the holder to make sure that you can get your kicks off? It's just an idea. But that's an important position. Find someone that can snap the football. And the guys that do it well, remember we've talked to Brink about that before, that, the snapper, if you're the holder on PATs and field goals, they will snap it and put it right in your hands, and they'll put the laces where you want them in your hands as well. I don't know how they do that. I'm not sure how you could practice that or be able to get that down, but they're that good. So the Godfather is going to join us coming up at 4:20. He's also done a little bit of work, just gathering a few more details on the Trailblazers' new ownership and what that means for the future. Oregon and Oregon State will meet Saturday at noon from Autzen. So 12 o'clock kick. Of course, you can hear it with the pregame starting at 10 on your home of the Bees, 1190 KEX. It's going to be on the Big Ten Network. But it's going to be a bloodbath, right? Based on what I've seen so far. When you have Oregon State in the situation they're in right now, and you have to step up to that type of level, like Texas Tech is on a totally different level, in a different stratosphere. And as good as Texas Tech is, they're not in the same stratosphere as Oregon. Just compare the rosters and look at the type of players they're going to face. And I think for Oregon, the game against Northwestern, weather wasn't nice. It's just one of those meh games. They got the win. They took care of business. They move on and get ready for Oregon State. The key for the Ducks, remain healthy and put yourself in the best position possible for Penn State. That's all that matters. And that game's critical because that tie break will likely determine one of the participants in the Big Championship game. Because after the Ducks face Penn State, there are games on the schedule they could lose. I just don't see them losing any of those games. I do believe that this team this year is better than last year's team, but it's a little bit early to say that, but that's what I'm seeing right now. Based on the dynamic play of Dante Moore, based on the play of their defensive tackles, and the continuity and the tackle play on their offensive line. I think those tools alone, plus the secondary looks great. I think Oregon is in a great spot right now. And again, I think they're going to beat Penn State because, Penn State doesn't win big games under James Franklin. The key for Oregon in the game against Penn State, and I'll keep saying this, weather the early storm that's sure to come with the emotion and the energy in the whiteout. So manage it early, meaning don't get caught up in the emotion. Don't lose your train of thought. Don't get burned or tricked on a big play early. And for the quarterback, play within yourself and don't force it. Don't turn it over. And if you weather that early storm to where you can put yourself in position going into halftime, like a one-possession game, then all of a sudden the pressure shifts and falls on Penn State. And we see what happens under James Franklin when they feel the pressure. They start to press. Their offense usually underperforms. And that's when teams are able to take advantage. And from what I've seen from Penn State, the key for Oregon is going to be, once again, the defensive line, that front seven. If you can contain their running game, which is a tall order, but if they can contain that and force Penn State into third down and longer situations or obvious passing situations, that's where I think the Ducks can feast. So we'll see if they can do it. Can you limit the run game and not allow that offensive line to take control? And we'll see. You know, the thing with Penn State, much like Oregon, the competition in the non-conference has been easy. So you always wonder, like with Texas Tech, like their schedule, same thing, non-conference, cream puffs. And they've got the best-rated defensive line. They spent a lot of money on the defensive line, but guess what? This weekend on Saturday morning, they're going to be in Utah taking on the Utes. My question for Texas Tech is very simple. That defensive line, which is top-rated right now in the country, that you invested all that money in, how are they going to do on the road against Utah, against legitimate tackles? Are the edge rushers going to be able to get off? You know, sometimes you just don't know with a certain group or certain players until they get in those big moments, in those big games. But from what I'm seeing from Oregon right now, I really like it. And, you know, I don't expect every game to be perfect. I know people want to see, 56-0 blowouts every week, but that's just not college football. That's not young men. You're not going to be perfect every week. The question is, can you find different ways to manufacture wins even on days when you don't have your best stuff? And I think Oregon's got that. But there's been a number of impressive teams thus far. The two teams that I think are frauds that I've seen thus far, Texas, I don't know what the deal is with Arch Manning. I just know he's not good enough to lead a team to a championship right now to be a legitimate playoff contender. And they got some tough games coming up. And Clemson, who lost at home to LSU, and LSU's defense looks legit. And then they just dropped this road game at Georgia Tech. Like, Clemson is a fraud. And the two teams in the ACC that appear to be the teams to beat are Florida State and Miami. We thought it was Clemson, but it's not. It's Miami and Florida State. But Clemson offense against LSU and Georgia Tech, anemic. They can't run the football that well. They don't throw it very well. They've got some playmakers on defense, but even Georgia Tech is able to push them around on Saturday and run the football. All right, we'll keep things rolling. We'll get to Brian Kelly's meltdown and apology coming up next, and then the Godfather at 4:20. You got the Rip City Drive with Chad doing on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, 4 o'clock chat here. The Seattle Mariners are on fire. They've won 9 straight and start the day a half game ahead of the Astros in the West. The next 6 games are all on the road and critical. 3-game series with KC starts today at 4:40. Logan Gilbert is on the mound. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they will meet the Astros in Houston. The NFL released a statement today saying Tom Brady did not violate any rules while sitting in the coach's box and wearing a headset last night between the Raiders and Chargers in Vegas. As an owner with the Raiders, Brady prohibited from being at other teams' facilities for his Fox production meetings, but is allowed to participate virtually and meet with players or coaches off-site. The Ducks are number 6 in the AP, 5 in the coaches poll, ahead of their meeting with Oregon State Saturday at Autzen. Kickoff at 12. It's on the Big Ten Network and on 1190 KX, your home of the Beavs. The Ducks favored by 34.5. Alex Brink will talk ball with us at 5:20. All right, just some interesting numbers to keep an eye on. I got to be honest with you. I don't know if they're back, but USC is playing really good football right now under Lincoln Riley. They're getting good quarterback play. And I wonder if sometimes if you don't have Caleb Williams on the field, if it's easier as a coach to have more balance in the offense. His greatest success came at Oklahoma when he did what? Oh, yeah, he ran the football. His offenses were always based on a run-first scheme, and then everything else came off of that, even though he coached sensational quarterbacks and guys like Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. But it was all about the running game. And if you look at USC so far this year, they're among the best in the nation at 240 yards a game, a 6.99 average yards per rush. He's back to doing Lincoln Riley-type football, which is great. Also, before the year, I mentioned Oregon and their struggles last year with the run game, averaging a pretty meager about, 4.6 yards a rush. I mean, that's not awful, but it's not great. And it's certainly not Oregon football in terms of what we've seen over the last several years in terms of, the incredible balance they've had on offense, the way they can run the football and really set up their offense with the run game. But this year, we've seen a major bounce back. And I think it's part of the reason why their attack, along with the athleticism and unique traits of Dante Moore, looks so good. But the Ducks, right now, 11th in the country at 247 yards a game, averaging 6.99 yards per rush. Like, those are good numbers. And when you're running the football like that, it opens up everything else for your offense. And, I mentioned their defensive tackles, how good those guys are playing, that front 7 of Oregon. The reason why that's so critical is because they have to go to Penn State. And the only way you're going to be able to win that game is to win the battle up front and not get pushed around. And if you can win that battle at the point of attack and slow down their run game, you're going to put yourself in a position to win. Other numbers that are somewhat interesting. No surprise, Utah off to a much better start. They fell off last year, had a bad year, which is not common under Kyle Whittingham, one of the best coaches in the country. They're 7th in the nation in rushing at 290 yards a game. But the weird part is the defense. If you look at total defense right now in the country, it's part of what makes this matchup that we're going to see on Saturday with Utah and Texas Tech so unique, because we're seeing teams change the way that they play and looking different than maybe what we've seen in the past, which I think is fascinating. So total defense right now, some of the usual suspects at the top. BYU's number 1 in the country. Minnesota, Iowa, Oklahoma, which has one of the best defenses in the country, is 4th. Missouri, Nebraska. Those are some of those teams. Arizona's off to a 3-0 start. They're 10th in the country in defense right now. But if you look here, Utah's tied for 11th with Penn State, and Texas Tech sits at 15. Now, Texas Tech for years with Mike Leach and Cliff Kingsbury and all the guys they had, they were known for the air raid offense. They would put up ridiculous points with guys like Patrick Mahomes, but they couldn't stop anybody. So they went in and invested in their team a little bit differently. And now with their offensive and defensive lines, they're winning the battle up front. And we saw, some of those guys in action Saturday against Oregon State. But that's going to be great. The key for that game, Utah-Texas Tech, which is a great game. Bizarre that they're kicking off at 9 a.m. in Utah. But the big thing to watch there is who's going to win the battle up front, the Utah offensive line or the Texas Tech defensive line, which are two of the best in the country, those two units right there. And then we'll see. We'll see what happens. Because my question would be this. If Utah can't run it against the Texas Tech front, then are they going to be able to throw the football on 3rd and long? I don't know. And also Texas Tech, traditionally awful away from home. Can they actually do something on the road and win a big game? So we'll see. But just some things to keep an eye on. Now, one thing that was great over the weekend, LSU, another big win. They're off to a great start. They've been one of the most impressive teams in the country thus far. They got a tough win against Florida. Normally a time for celebration. You're unbeaten. You're moving on. You get off to a good start in conference. But it's a little bit different down south, where sometimes winning is not enough. Fans want to know why you're struggling in certain areas. And take a listen to Brian Kelly, head coach of the LSU Tigers, melting down on the press.
We won the game 20-10. Try another question. What do you want me to tell you? I just laid it out for you. We played the game to win the game.
All right. How about 3rd down then? What is going on with 3rd down?
It's one game. Last game, we were great on 3rd down. You're looking at this from the wrong perspective. LSU won the football game. What do you want? You want us to win 70-0 against Florida to keep you happy?
No, I think people want to know why you can't run the ball, quite honestly.
We can run the ball. Did you see the last play of the game? That's all you need. You just need one. There's a ridiculous questions, and I'm getting tired of it. That football team just worked their tail off to get an SEC win, and you want to know what's wrong. You know what? You're spoiled. This team is 17-1 at night. Give them some respect. How about that? Give them some respect instead of micro-analyzing every little thing. This is ridiculous. For a group of seasoned reporters, that kind of question is so out of line.
That right there would be Mr. Brian Kelly. Very upset with the questioning that was taking place. Very upset. Now, I find it all hilarious because Brian Kelly, he showed up to town and had the fake accent, which was very douchey. And he's been a red ass for most of his career. Like most coaches. He's never really in a good mood. Always kind of got the red ass thing going on, but the fake accent was just ridiculous. It's like, come on, man. You're not Cajun. Why do you have to talk like that? What are you, a politician? So there you have it. Brian Kelly very upset. And I can understand where he's coming from. He's trying to protect his players. And LSU is off to a great start. But again, part of being a head coach is learning how to deal with the media, answering questions, and being patient even when you get questions you don't like. Garrett Nussmeier, by the way, in that game, 220 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and 1 pick. And LSU had 102 yards rushing in the game. Not great, not horrible, but nothing outstanding. But their defense was terrific. They did what they were supposed to do. 5 turnovers for Florida. They held the Gators to 79 yards rushing. Now, the 3rd downs were mentioned. LSU just 4 of 14 on 3rd down. Well, Brian Kelly decided to make amends. Here's the apology.
Before I get to the game in Southeast Louisiana, I want to go back to the press conference after the game. I've texted with Mike and offered my apology to him for the way I handled the questioning.
I think it's important to understand that, my standards relative to how we work with the media on a day-to-day basis need to be higher, and I take responsibility for that, and I'll be better in the future. And understanding also the way I'm thinking after a game, and we've mentioned this a couple of times, the emotions of the game right after it. I haven't watched any film. It's difficult to make those assessments of specifics, and I'm going to defend my team. I'm going to defend my players first and foremost. But having said that, I publicly apologize to Mike, and he's an outstanding reporter. He works hard, and we'll do better moving forward.
All right. What do you mean we will do better moving forward? You mean you, Coach? So here's why I come out on this stuff. I look at it the same way I do the Trent Bray, like halftime F-bomb with Nigel Burton. Football, and I'm not making an excuse for any of the coaches. Like, I don't feel bad for these guys. You make tens of millions of dollars to coach a kid's game. You make a king's ransom coaching a kid's game. So I don't think it's too much to ask that you show up to the press conference and answer questions without being an a-hole. I think that's a reasonable expectation. Hey, we're going to give you tens of millions of dollars to coach football. Do you think it's possible that you can show up to a press conference, answer questions, and not be an a-hole? I think that's a reasonable expectation. But I also understand that football is an emotional game. These coaches work ridiculous numbers of hours to get ready for one game that happens on Saturday. And when you put a microphone in front of a coach at halftime when things aren't going well, or in Trent Bray's case, after your punter hits a worm burner on the turf because you can't get the snap to the punter and someone picks it up and runs it back for a touchdown, what do you expect him to do? He's not going to be in a good mood, and you're going to put a mic in front of his face? It might not be the best time to talk to the coach. And after a game the same way, emotions are still running high. So sometimes these guys are going to be a little bit hot and not handle questions in the best way possible. So I give them a little bit of a grace and a little leeway under those circumstances. But, I understand where Coach Kelly's coming from. He's trying to protect his players. They're coming off a big win over Florida, and they've gotten off to a very good start in conference. But it's the way it goes. You're paid big money, and you have a lot of fans who are interested in your product, and they want to know why you're 4-14 on third down, Coach. And they want to know why you only ran it for 102 yards. It might be nicer if we had a simpler world where, hey, we got the win, that's all that matters, but that's not all that matters now. But I still rank the fake accent ahead of this meltdown or anything else Brian Kelly's done. I can handle a coach being a little bit red-assed after a game or during halftime, but I don't want a guy showing up pretending to have an accent when he doesn't, because that's fake, and I don't like fakeness. All right, we'll come back, and we'll dive into this Trent Bray situation and any details the Godfather's been able to gather on the Trailblazers' new owner, Mr. Dundon. All right, you can reach out, 503-248-0620. You got the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620, Rip City Radio. All right, our next guest, you can read him and just go to dwightjaynes.substack.com. It's great to have the Godfather back on the show. Now, Godfather, the Mariners are on fire. They've won 9 straight, and they open up action today, a half game in front of the Astros. But they've been Jekyll and Hyde of late, and they're opening up a 6-game road trip, 3 in Kansas City and 3 in Houston. So should we expect them to go right back into the tank? What do you expect on this road trip from them?
I don't know. They've been very unlike Mariners here recently. It surprised me. They've had a kind of a easy schedule, and I'm not sure what's going to happen in Kansas City because the Royals are still sort of mathematically in for a wild card berth. But the Mariners have gotten really fortunate because Houston has had tons of injuries and have kind of collapsed. And I thought Seattle might have trouble holding on to a wild card berth, but they're going to go ahead and win that division, so it's really not going to matter. I think they're going to end up above Houston in those standings and win that division, which is quite surprising to me, the way they played most of the year.
What's been your biggest surprise so far this season? Is it the Phillies bouncing back, and they clinched the East last night in L.A. with the win over the Dodgers? Is it the play of the Brewers? Is it the Dodgers underachieving? Like, what's really jumped out at you as something you did not anticipate?
Several things. First of all, I did not expect Milwaukee to be as good as they have been. The Brewers have been terrific this season, and I got to tell you, they've been a surprise. The Cubs have played pretty well, tailspin in the second half of the season. And then, really, the Dodgers have surprised me not playing better than they have. I expected more from them. It's a team that's averaged about 105, 106 wins a year. They're not going to get that this year with the additions they've made and the payroll they have. I think a lot of people expected more from them. I thought they'd be a more dominant team than they've been.
You know, it's interesting. I saw you comment on this on X the other night. It's different now in today's game where if a ball hits the ground, it's tossed out and the ump puts a new ball into play. But back in the old days, it wasn't like that. And Earl Hershiser had made the comment that, hey, you know, because of my relationship with the Lord, I'm not going to scuff or doctor a ball. But if a ball gets in my hand that's got a scuff on it, then my job is to get guys out. So that used to be a big deal, but not so much anymore.
Yeah, it's funny how pitchers have, over the years, lost the ability to make the ball move using a scuff, you know. And I was a clubhouse boy as a kid and in a AAA ballpark, Portland, and I had so many pitchers that I talked to because I was working with kids at the time and I wanted to know some tricks of the trade. And they showed me how to use the scuff marks to make the ball sink, to make it tail, to do all kinds of things. And players used to scuff it intentionally. They'd use a belt buckle or, you know, there's stories of these guys taping sandpaper to their belts or to their finger or to their glove or something like that and actually going to work on it. They were like home handymen, you know, and they, you know, Phil Necro, he used to show up at old timers games with a tool belt on, and he had electric drill and all kinds of things, just as a joke, you know, because everybody knew he was either throwing a spitball or was doctoring it up a little bit. So they don't do it anymore. They don't know how, and I can't imagine how much Major League Baseball is spending on baseballs nowadays because they're not in the game very long. They get thrown out, one hit, one ball in the dirt, one ball back to the screen. Anytime, they just throw them out of the game, brand new balls virtually.
Well, what was the main trick back in the day? Like, I remember pitchers like having a little piece of sandpaper in their pocket, and when the ump would come out to check if they got a complaint from the opposing team, you would see them quietly try to discard it off to the side. But what was the main tool or method they would use to scuff the ball?
Well, I think what you saw most was probably some article of clothing. I know they used belt buckles. They did have sandpaper taped to their forearm or something like that. A lot of guys used Vaseline, and they would put it in various parts of their body, upper arm, to where, or even on their head somewhere, and then they'd rub it and they'd have the Vaseline on the ball. I was warming up a relief pitcher in Portland at the age of 16 once in the very dark bullpen down the right field line that the Beavers used to use. He didn't tell me anything. I just saw him go over to the bench, and he was doing something, fiddling around. He came back, threw a fastball to me that in the last 4 or 5 feet to the plate dropped about a foot and hit me. Instead of in the glove, it hit me in the arm and just about broke my arm. And all the pitchers laughed because he had loaded one up on me and threw it to me, and they all had a good laugh. I was the poor kid that was sitting there, the butt of the joke, but I knew real quick what kind of action that greaseball had. I'll tell you that.
Well, wasn't it Gaylord Perry that would use Vaseline amongst other things?
Oh, yeah, Gaylord Perry was known for that. Yeah, there were a lot of guys using what they called foreign substances in those days. That's what they were called, foreign substances. But they used them very successfully. In a lot of cases, the umpires really didn't want to enforce too much, particularly with the veterans. They also used a lot of pine tar, and that is kind of, that's creeped in a little bit here and there. They were using it a few years ago, and baseball got a lot tougher. And now you see when a pitcher comes into the game or he leaves after the inning, they inspect their gloves now.
Yeah.
And that's because they were using a sticky substance, which really helps you grip the curveball.
Yeah, that's what I would think with something sticky like pine tar. Like you could get some ridiculous movement on the ball with that stuff, I would think.
Yeah, Portland, the Beavers had a reliever named Rudy Hernandez, and I had to wash the uniforms for the players after every series. Nowadays they get washed after every game, but in those days, no. But anyway, I used to have to wash his uniform pants, and his back right pocket, he was a right-handed pitcher, his back right pocket was just covered in pine tar. And he would just reach back there in his back pocket and load it up. And, boy, that was hard to get that stuff out of his uniform, I can tell you that.
Where do you think Cal Raleigh might come in the MVP voting?
I think it's going to be really close. I have a feeling he may not make it because of the Eastern influence. Judge plays in New York, and he's a Yankee, and all that always seems to count a lot. And I would say Aaron Judge has had a terrific season, and when you overall look at all his metrics other than his home runs, and he's hit a lot of home runs, he has the edge over Raleigh. And the only edge Raleigh really has is that he's a catcher, and the wear and tear on catchers has really, it usually has a big effect by the end of the season. But Cal seems to be, not affected by that too much, and he's hit a lot of home runs. I think that's a real tough vote, to tell you the truth, Chad. I almost lean toward Judge because, Raleigh's hitting like 243, something like that. And, I'm still old-fashioned enough that I value batting average. I know a lot of people in baseball now don't, but I do.
You think he can get to 60?
No, I don't. I don't, because they're pitching him much more carefully now. Again, he's getting worn down. He's catching every day. I think that's a real reach. He's not going to be playing in Kansas City's not a very home run friendly ballpark, and the Kingdom never has been either. But it affects right-handed hitters more than left-handers, and he hits more left-handed at home than he does right-handed. Because you hit left-handed more often because there's more right-handed pitchers.
Well, I guess the race to keep an eye on Griffey, I think, is the franchise leader at 56 in a season. Raleigh just needs 3 more homers to pass Griffey, which is pretty wild if you think about that.
Yeah, every time I hear of him, though, all I can think of is my parents because they used to smoke Raleigh cigarettes. Remember those?
Yes, I do.
They had the Raleigh coupons on the back. And I can still see my mother sitting there bundling all these coupons together and wrapping them in rubber bands and then sending them in for some silly kitchen item that we probably didn't need anyway.
Yes.
That they were putting their lungs at risk with.
Yeah, the 2 things I used to collect, I would collect green stamps with my grandmother, and they had an actual redemption store in Ponca City where you could go and get like a basketball or different sporting goods or things with the green stamps. And then I remember cutting out the proof of purchases from my boxes of cereal that you could send in to get some type of toy or whatever. Those are the 2 things I remember collecting as a youngster.
Yeah, remember they had those books that you had to paste the green stamps in?
Yes, I had those
put them in books.
Yes.
Yeah.
The amazing part is that how you and I don't have some type of a weird cancer from licking all the green stamps.
Yeah, that and eating the gum, chewing the gum that came with baseball cards.
It's funny.
That stuff was toxic.
It was toxic. But it's funny, Godfather, as a youngster, and you'll understand this, few things were more satisfying than putting that gum in your mouth and crunching it down, because it was crunchy until you finally got it into a workable piece of gum. Like that, the satisfaction that came from that as a kid was awesome, because that meant you just opened up a brand new pack of cards.
Yeah, I can remember that. You put that in at the start of the game, and usually by about the second inning, you had it softened up enough.
Yes.
But it took a couple innings to get it going.
My jaw was exhausted.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I want to talk about Trent Bray. I guess what I want to ask you is like, what's your take on where the program is at and your thoughts on the job that Bray has done?
Well, really two separate questions that I'll answer in two separate ways. The program's not in a very good position, but it's not Trent Bray's fault. The fault is the downfall of the Pac-12 and what happened to the whole franchise of Oregon State sports. It's just darn near impossible to operate as an independent. Yes, they've got a new Pac-12 coming online next year, but let's be honest about that. It's going to be harder to recruit to that league without the UCLAs, USCs, Stanfords, Washington, Oregon, all those big teams. And so I think the Beavers are in a really, really difficult situation. They don't have a lot of NIL money. They're not in a position to recruit as well as they once did. And to somehow blame Trent Bray for all that is crazy. I don't know what they expected. And they hired him knowing he'd never been a head coach before, but he wanted the job. He was a Beaver through and through. And I think you have to be patient with a coach like that. He's learning on the job, but let him learn as the program develops. Because, Chad, they're in a spot now where expectations have to be low. There just can't be any big expectation of how they're going to do. They did better last year than I thought they had a right to do because they had a few leftovers from previous. But if you fired him now, the consequences of that would be unbelievable. I mean, first of all, I don't know how you'd pay him off and then pay a new coach. I don't know how you'd find a good, solid veteran coach who would want that job. And then, on the other hand, the new rules, if you fire your coach during the season, the players automatically get a 30-day portal window. Well, they'd lose their quarterback because he's probably good enough to go somewhere else and make some money. They'd lose any other player on their roster who's good, and it would be a decimation. You say, well, they're not going anywhere anyway. What would it matter if they lost a few players? Well, the problem is you need a certain amount of players to play, and you need them to be, as good as you can get. And that's what they have right now. They're as good as they can possibly get. And it's going to take a miracle. They need a financial angel to come in there and help. And I think they've probably been looking high and low for that for years now and don't have one. But they need somebody with a lot of money to help them. And then they need that Pac-12 to somehow jumpstart. And a lot of those teams somehow, with the status of being in a Pac-12, can bring their programs up to where it's close to a Power 5 level.
Now, don't you think it might be beneficial? I mean, look, it's quite possible that Trent Bray is in over his head. There have been other coordinators who gave it a shot as a head coach and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But it might be best if the conference is going to be formed next year. Maybe it's best to show a little bit of patience and see if you can ride this out, so that I think by communicating stability within the program, that can help you keep some players, but also allow Trent Bray to continue to grow on the job. Much like, like with Chauncey Billups, right? He's gotten better year by year in the job with the Trailblazers. So maybe a little patience in a day and age where people don't want patience. Maybe that's the best thing for Coach Bray.
Yeah, you're speaking to the choir, Chad. I absolutely believe what you just said. To have high expectations for a guy who's never been a head coach is not fair. And at the same time, it's especially not fair when we all know what kind of roster do they have. They're like Washington State. Washington State's just been robbed by everybody, not only for players. Washington State's been robbed for their coaching staff. And much like Oregon State was before Bray came in. And, it's really difficult. These teams, a lot of them that they're playing are high-level teams. You play Texas Tech at their place. What did you expect from that game? My goodness. I mean, I don't know that Jonathan Smith, with the team he had, is going to go in there this year and beat them. It's just he's a victim of high expectations, and there shouldn't be any expectations right now. They're in a transition period. Like you said, let's get into the conference, show some patience, and then see what happens from there. Let's see if the recruiting can pick up a little bit. Let's see if if he gets a better handle on coaching. And sure, he makes mistakes, but hey, let's face it. The first couple of years, Dan Lanning had some mistakes too. Now, he had a lot better players to help cover up for some of those mistakes, but you and I talked on the air about some of the coaching things they did or didn't do, and frankly, it cost them a game or two along the way. And so that's why I think you're patient with young head coaches who are inexperienced.
Well, you brought up a few good points when we talked earlier before the show that I wanted to bring up. One, how these smaller schools are becoming like a farm system, like we see in Major League Baseball, where the bigger schools come in and just pluck the players. You mentioned Washington State. Oklahoma struggled last year, so they went and grabbed John Mateer and the WSU offensive coordinator. And now, look, they're one of the best teams in the country, I mean, it's hard to compete with that when they can step up and offer Mateer and the coach more money to come and coach in a better conference against supreme competition.
Absolutely. And Oregon State's stock and trade for years, Chad. I can go all the way back to the D. Andros era and then moving forward through all the coaches since. And you talk about the good ones and Dennis Erickson. You talk about Mike Riley in particular. They were able to recruit maybe not the 4- and 5-star guys. They would get good 3-star guys, and by the time they were graduating, they were getting drafted in the NFL. They had moved them up the ladder with development. Nowadays, you're developing players for the big schools. If you get good players, they're just going to pluck them. They're going to come in with a big checkbook. They're going to steal your players. They're going to steal your good coordinators, whoever they are. They're going to move forward. And unless the rules change somehow, all of these lower level leagues, the Mountain West, Big Sky, I don't know, AAC, whatever, you're going to turn them into farm clubs for the big teams, and that's really all they're going to be, as long as the transfer portal allows kids to change schools with virtually no penalty, and then there's money out there. So now you have the motivation to change and the avenue to go and change. I don't blame a kid for moving up. That's kind of the way things work in this country. You try to better yourself, but it doesn't work to the advantage of any of the schools below the Power 5.
The other good point you made, too, is if you're Coach Bray, I think two coaches, Vatek and UCLA just fired their coaches. Why not scour the rosters to see if you can find someone that can snap the football? Back to your punter.
Yeah, I think that's what I would do. If there was any money at all left in their NIL funds, I'd be using that to try and get a long snapper. They definitely need a long snapper. And, I mean, look, he's not throwing that guy out there because he thinks there's going to be a sudden change. He just, I mean, that's a tough spot to fill. And it's not like they're high retail players. I mean, you can probably get one for a reasonable amount of NIL money, but they don't have one, and they need to get one. And the one they had last year is not good this year. So I don't know how you do that. I think long snappers probably get the yips just like second basemen and putters and everybody else gets. But they need to do that. They need to try and do that. But
I'd offer Beaver Bucks for life.
It's a sad state of affairs.
Beaver Bucks for life, if you can be a long snapper for us. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I think so. It's gonna, as we move forward in time, though, it's gonna take a lot of Beaver Bucks to buy that hot dog at the concession stand. I'll tell you that.
All right, one final question for you. What's the most interesting thing you found as you started to do a little bit of research on the Blazers' soon-to-be new owner, Tom Dundon?
Well, I wrote about it today, Chad, and thanks for reading that. I'm always interested in how these guys make their money. How do you get to be a billionaire? And so, fortunately for me, a guy named Tom Zeller, who runs a really good Substack called Good Morning, It's Basketball, he found out that Dundon is a guy who made his money with subprime auto loans. Now, some people don't know what that is, but they're the guys that advertise that they'll give you a loan. Bad credit? No problem. Haven't paid your bills? No problem. We'll loan you money. And, of course, they do at supremely high interest rates. If you skip a payment, then they load money on to the end of the whole thing. It's a shady kind of business, and he made a lot of money doing it. Now, I don't know. Do we judge him for that? I don't know. It was legal, most likely. But it's kind of not like, well, I don't know. It's not like doing it with creating new software for Microsoft. Let's put it that way.
A little unsavory, maybe.
You said that, and I think you're probably right. That's probably a good way to describe it, unsavory.
It's kind of like a check cashing loan business, right? Like they'll give you money, but you're going to pay a lot for it. Yeah.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, it's like the guys do. Well, your check doesn't come out for 2 weeks. We'll give you the money now. Well, they'll give it to you now, but boy, I hate to think what you might have to pay back once you do get your check. You know?
Oh, my goodness. All right, you got to check him out. You can read him. Dwight Jaynes is the man. You can check out his Substack. Hey, Godfather, nice chatting with you, my friend. Enjoy the Civil War this weekend.
It is the Civil War, right, Chad? We are the guys that kept calling it that.
Yes, and I'm glad to see that people are coming back around to calling it the Civil War again. Thank God.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I agree.
All right, buddy. I'll catch up with you soon.
All right, see you.
All right, there you go. There's the Godfather. Telephone number 503-248-0620. Now, you can jump on board if you'd like. Alex Brink is going to talk ball coming up at 5:20. Big thanks to the Godfather. I'll react to a couple of his thoughts with the Beaver program. Coming up next on the Rip City Drive on your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, big thanks to the Godfather. I really do think that right now patience is going to be the best pathway for the Oregon State Beavers. Allow Trent Bray a little more time to try and grow into the role. You know, we'll have a brand new Pac-12 as of next year, and we'll see which way the program is able to go. But the reality is, when he took over the program, they were in ruins, right? Much like when Jonathan Smith stepped in for that buffoon who was the head coach before him, Gary Anderson. I mean, Gary Anderson single-handedly tried to run the program into the ground, and he succeeded. And when Smith took over, the cupboard was bare, and it took time before he was able to rebuild it. I mean, the reality is when Trent Bray took over, the program was in ruins. Smith took off. They had no conference, and he had to rebuild from scratch. And that takes time, especially at a school like Oregon State. Now, if he's not the guy, and you know he's not the guy, and you're 100% certain on that, then make the move. Brendan looked up the number. It's $4.8 million on the buyout. That's probably more than they can afford in combination with having to pay a new coach. But I'm not with Trent Bray every day. I don't have conversations with him. I don't know what he's like leading a program because I'm not in those walls. All I know is it takes time for a guy to grow into that role. And it's possible he's in over his head. It wouldn't be the first guy. It's not an indictment on him. Some guys aren't meant to be head coaches. But maybe he just needs more time to grow and to continue to learn on the job. You know, like Chauncey Billups wasn't really ready to be a head coach when he took over the Trailblazers. But he's gotten better year by year with time. And I think the stability might be the best thing for the Beavs right now. But that's the other problem, too. You have $4.8 million to buy out Bray, plus you got to come up with a scratch to pay a different head coach. I don't think they got the money to do that. Probably don't have the money to do that. Now, the question would be is if you fire Bray, let's just say you made the move. You got a wild hair and said, all right, we're making the change. Who can you bring in? Could you find an established head coach that doesn't have a job right now that might want to come in and try and resurrect the program? That's unlikely. Do you look at the FCS ranks to find the next up-and-comer? I don't know. Maybe a little more patience. No one likes to hear that in today's sports world. Patience, my friends. Trust the process. You know, we know all the lines, right? Trust the process. It's going to take some time. Just requires a little bit of patience. I'm a sports fan. I don't like patience, man. I want to win right now. But the Beavers are up against it right now. I thought the great point that the Godfather made, too, was, you know, the way that coaches of the past, like Mike Riley, you know, they would come in and recruit and develop and then set themselves up to make a good run every, 3 to 4 years. But you can't even do that now because if you bring guys in and you develop them and they become good, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get John Mateered. And some other big school is going to step in and pay more money for your players you developed so that they can go to the next level. I mean, the efforts by Oklahoma just to get Mateer and his offensive coordinator have been life-changing. He stepped in, is playing terrific football, and now the Sooners are a threat in the SEC. That's what these smaller schools are doing now. They are basically developing players for the bigger schools. That's really what's going on. It's a mess. And frankly, after that game, if someone asked me, do I enjoy being a head coach, I'd be like, no, frankly, I don't. It sucks. You got a Snickers? Like, it depends on the moment, right? Like, depending on the moment, if you ask me, do you love your kids? I might give you a different answer, you know? I'm just saying. All right, 503-248-0620. Alex Brink, former Coug, is going to join us. We'll talk Apple Cup. We'll get his take on Jake Browning. Sucks for the Bengals, man. I like I've said before, great quarterback play is needed in the NFL. And to see a guy like Joe Burrow go down with that turf toe, and I'll ask Alex Brink if he's ever had turf toe. Because when you hear the word turf toe, it's like, yeah, well, he's got, he scraped his toe on the turf? But I guess it's a little bit worse than that. It just doesn't sound like a bad injury, right? Like when someone says they had a ruptured spleen, I understand that's bad. But when I hear turf toe, I'm like, what? You got a bad toe? Get out there and play. But it's worse than that. And Joe Burrow looks like he's going to miss maybe the rest of the year. That sucks. Don't worry. I'm sure the Bengals will be able to use a coupon on a team doctor to help with his foot issue. Hey, Burrow, don't trust the team. Go and pay for your own medical advice because the team's going to go cheap on you. You don't want that. They'll go generic, I guarantee it. All right, Alex Brink at 5:20, you got the Rip City Drive. By the way, the Mariners off to a great start, up 2-0 on the Royals as they kick off this critical 6-game road trip with 3 coming up in Houston. All right, what's going on? It's 5 o'clock. Chad here. The Mariners opened the day a half game in front of the Astros in the West. They have won 9 straight. They're on fire. And today they kicked off a 6-game roadie, 3 in Kansas City, and then 3 Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in Houston against the Astros, which will likely determine the division winner. Right now, top of the second in Kansas City. The Mariners on top of the Royals by a score of 2-0. The NFL came out with an announcement today saying that Tom Brady did not violate any rules while sitting in the coach's box and wearing a headset during last night's Monday Night Football game with the Raiders and Chargers. As an owner with the Raiders, Brady is prohibited from being at other teams' facilities during the week for his Fox production meetings, but can participate virtually with players and coaches or off-site. The Ducks, 6th in the AP, 5th in the coaches' poll. They are 34.5-point favorites against Oregon State Saturday kickoff at 12.
And they run 4. Herbert has all day in the pocket. Takes a shot downfield. Q wide open. Caught. Quentin Johnston. Touchdown. Chargers. 60-yard touchdown. Herbert to Q.
Mayfield sends him back in motion. Hands the ball off for Sean White. Into the end zone. Is he in? Is he in? Touchdown Tampa Bay. Touchdown Tampa Bay. Buccaneers take the lead at 20-19.
Well, I've been loving football season thus far. Let me tell you what I don't need in my life. Wasting 4 hours of my Sunday afternoon watching the Broncos underperform and play like morons and lose to the Colts. I don't need that in my life. And then you get to the end, and Shane Steichen, for about 2 minutes, went full on Nathaniel Hackett and settled for a 60-yard field goal, which, of course, his kicker missed, only to have the refs come in and throw a flag on the Broncos for leverage. They move it ahead 15 yards, and he boomed it straight between the uprights. Game over, 29-28, which is why I told you last week I was very concerned about the Broncos going into Indianapolis. Also, not very impressed with the defense, which is supposed to be maybe the best unit in the NFL. Hey, Vance Joseph, simple question for you. Why was Daniel Jones shredding you like Peyton Manning? Why? And why did you give up almost 500 yards in total offense to Daniel Jones and that Colts offense? And why did Jonathan Taylor look like Herschel Walker winning the Heisman at Georgia against your defense? And hey, Sean Payton, why was your team wildly undisciplined with penalties and poor turnovers late in the game? You want to explain that to me? That was a disaster. Now, again, it's only one game, but the reality is the Broncos coming up on the schedule. And this is why the NFL is so great and why every game matters. So you blow a game on the road to the Colts and Daniel Jones, who shredded your defense. And I'm sorry, they are a garbage defense until I tell you otherwise. You cannot let Daniel Jones shred you and dominate you. Also, a good reminder, too, like Daniel Jones was much maligned during his time in New York. But if you watch the game between the Giants and the Cowboys on Sunday and you saw Russell Wilson running for his life, you might understand that Daniel Jones was playing behind a crap offensive line, and that may have been a part of the reason or a major part of the reason as to why he struggled with New York and the Giants. Because in Indianapolis, behind a legit offensive line and a good head coach, he looks like a decent quarterback. So weird how that happens. You get Baker Mayfield out of Cleveland. He's a top 10 quarterback now with Tampa. You get Sam Darnold away from New York and the Jets. He looks like a pretty darn good quarterback with the Seahawks right now. You get Geno Smith away from the Jets. He looks like a pretty good quarterback. So just keep that in mind. But, yeah, that was so annoying. And I don't even have a problem with the leverage call. I mean, technically, by the rule, the Broncos tried to use leverage to block the kick. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If I line up in the final moments of a game and some guy's got to kick a 60-yarder, then when the ball is snapped, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not touching anyone. I'm not rushing anyone. I'm just going to stand there and make the guy prove it that he can make it. Because I'm going to go with he's going to shank that bad boy, a 60-yarder. That's all. Don't give the ref any reason to throw the flag. That's all. And for the refs, too, it is annoying. Just so they know, it's like we're not there to watch you work really hard at your job, all right? Again, I don't have a problem with the call. The Broncos deserve that loss. When you throw a key pick late, you miss a field goal, and you have a bad penalty late in the game, you deserve to lose. But here's what's coming up for the Broncos now after that game that they just coughed up against the Colts and Daniel Jones. They're going to play at L.A. against the Chargers on Sunday. That's a loss. And then they get Cincinnati on a Monday night at home. Thankfully, Joe Burrow's out. That's going to be a win. And then you got to go to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles, who just curb stomped the Chiefs in Kansas City with great line of scrimmage play. That was a good game. Philadelphia is legit. There's no question about it. They run the football well. They're great at the line of scrimmage. They have an identity. They know what they do. And they're legit. So Philadelphia, Green Bay, and whoever else you want to put in there in the NFC. Tampa Bay. It's been great. But the other Broncos are a disaster. Nice game. Nice effort. Nice job, defense. Daniel Jones looked like Peyton Manning as he was shredding you up and down the field. And yet, when they tried to give you the game, you coughed it right back up. It's like when you play like garbage and a team gives you an opportunity, take advantage of it. Oh, my gosh, that's what I hate about football. You invest so much time, and then you watch a game like that, and the result is so embittering. It's like, nice work. Whatever. All right, different things I want to touch on. How about the Bears right now? Here's a question. How long will Ben Johnson, who's about to bust a gasket, how patient will he be with Caleb Williams? Here's Ben after his team gave up 52 to the Detroit Lions.
What these guys look like when the ball's not in their hands, that's a big deal for us. And so there were some plays there yesterday that we weren't quite as pleased with what that looked like on tape. And so we're going to find out this week at practice who wants to practice hard and who wants to be a little bit more involved with the game plan here going into Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing we're learning about the Bears, obviously they're an organization that's not run very well. The roster is not very good. And you've got Ben Johnson who wants his plays run a certain way. And right now, Caleb Williams is not getting the job done. I think you've got to continue to coach and remain patient. I just don't know how much longer Ben Johnson will stick with Caleb if he continues to play like this. And credit to Detroit. After getting worked in their opener against Green Bay, I learned a couple of things. One, Detroit's still a good football team, even though they had to replace both coordinators. And two, don't overreact to a team losing at Green Bay. The Packers are legit. That's a good football team. So there you have it. Ben Johnson, with Caleb Williams, all the things that Alex Brink and others were concerned about when he came out of the draft, being on schedule, on time and accuracy, taking sacks, like all the things, they're still popping up. But again, I blame the Bears because last year they stuck with Eberflus, bad idea. And now they had to make the transition to Ben Johnson. You have to show some type of patience. I believe in Caleb Williams, but he's got to start to turn it around because those issues that are so critical to success as a quarterback, not holding on to the football, being on schedule with the play, delivering it on time, on target, those things are so important to a good quarterback play. Right now, we're not seeing it. Elsewhere, I mentioned Joe Burrow being out potentially for the rest of the year. That means Jake Browning. UW Dog is going to step in now and take over, and apparently Zach Taylor's got confidence.
I feel very confident in Jake. I think Jake has proven his caliber in this league and that he can help us win football games and contend for all the things that we want to contend for. But that being said, we're always open to bringing in other people at this point. We got two quarterbacks sitting in this room, and so I'm sure we'll turn over a lot of rocks trying to find another guy.
All right, there you go. Great opportunity for Jake Browning. In a lot of the action I've seen him where he's had a chance to play, I like what I've seen. I like his demeanor. I think he's smart. Big opportunity, but very frustrating as a Bengal fan because with Joe Burrow, you're a contender. Without Joe Burrow, you're done. That's pretty much it. I would be surprised if the Bengals make the playoffs now with Jake Browning as quarterback. And it just sucks to work all off season and get ready for a brand new year only to have your quarterback go down and now you're done. It's brutal. And that opens up a slot possibly for the Steelers. Definitely not the Browns. But it could open up a slot for the Steelers to maybe slide into the playoffs. How about Houston at 0-2? Going to Jacksonville this weekend. Their defense is legit, but seeing them through the first two games against the Rams and last night against the Bucs, their offensive line, as we talked about, a major concern going into the year. Their offense is a miss right now. So while I believe in their defense, I mean, at 0-2 now, you know how it works in the NFL. When you're 0-2, I mean, you're teetering on disaster. But their offense is struggling. They couldn't run the football last night. A lot of pressure on C.J. Stroud, and the Bucs were able to take full advantage. It's crazy. So the Texans' offensive line is a problem. So I guess other teams, in terms of what's jumping out at me, the Bills, they dominated the Jets this past weekend. Their defense may not be dominant like we see with some other teams, like maybe the Chargers' defense early in the season, but Josh Allen and the offense is super powered. Love what Buffalo's doing right now. The Dolphins might be the worst team in football. They're absolute garbage. The Patriots are much improved. They're like the Raiders from the standpoint that you move on from Gerard Mayo. You bring in Mike Vrabel. You now have a team that has direction. So they're no longer a rudderless ship. You can just tell that the operation is better. The question is, how much time is it going to take? Another year? Is it like half the season? They're still working with the offense and getting Drake May where he's at. And then the Jets, I think they're on the right track with Aaron Glenn, but their offense was a disaster. And that goes back to what we were talking about with the week one overreactions, the week one mirage. The Jets offense, after looking great against Pittsburgh, non-existent in that loss to the Bills. Baltimore, nice bounce back after that brutal opening loss at Buffalo, dominating the Browns. Even though the numbers weren't great, they got the win. Cincinnati now in serious trouble with Jake Browning at quarterback. The Browns are dead, and I think the Steelers are going to be pretty good. Great win by the Seahawks this Sunday, going into Pittsburgh and getting the job done. The Texans are a mess. The Colts right now might be the best team in the South with this resurgence of Daniel Jones. The Jaguars are not good, and now I'm starting to worry if Trevor Lawrence is kind of a bust. And Tennessee's just young quarterback, but their coaching staff is terrible, like really bad, and it's going to cost them more games. In the AFC West, the Chargers right now are the best team through the first couple of weeks. Kansas City at 0-2, they've got issues. And then you have Denver and Las Vegas sitting there at 1-1. I think Philadelphia looks great. Washington has concerns now with Jaden Daniels getting banged up. In the North, Chicago is terrible. Detroit and Green Bay are the class. And J.J. McCarthy, it doesn't look like he's going to play this coming weekend, but he's in over his head right now. It's going to take some time with J.J. In the South, Tampa Bay, head and shoulders above Atlanta, Carolina, and the Saints. Carolina sucks. The Saints are terrible. And the Falcons, they're a work in progress, but I like what I see from Michael Penix. In the NFC West, great bounce back by Seattle, getting the road win at Pittsburgh, making the trip across the country, winning an early game. The 49ers scratched out a win without Brock Purdy. The Rams look pretty good. And the Cardinals at 2-0 now after the victory over the Saints and the Panthers. So the NFC West is very intriguing. All right, Alex Brink's coming up next. We'll preview the Apple Cup. We'll get his take on Trent Bray. All of that coming up next. You can reach out to me on X at Chad and Rip City, and you can call the show at 503-248-0620. Former Coug Alex Brink, our college football and NFL insider, next. All right, Rip City Drive. It's my pleasure to welcome back our college football and NFL insider from E4 Sports, former Washington State Cougar Alex Brink, who's back. Brink, what's up, brother?
What is going on, Chad?
Oh, dude, I'm loving the ball. I've enjoyed the games, both in college and the NFL, to kick off the year over the first few weeks more than I ever have. There's been so many great stories, a lot of great games, and I'm enjoying the young quarterback play, which has been fun.
Oh, there's so many good things going. I tell you what, it's definitely, some good quarterback play, some bad quarterback play, but, a lot of fun stuff happening for sure.
I want to start with Trent Bray. He's been in the news over the last couple of days following the Beavers getting hammered down at Texas Tech. They're winless on the season. They've got their big game coming up against Oregon this weekend. A lot of people are criticizing Coach Bray, but, the way I look at this situation is, how much do you put on him compared to the fact that you look at the roster and the challenges he's facing right now at Oregon State and the fact that they just don't have the talent to match up with teams like Texas Tech or Oregon? What are you seeing right now from the Beavs?
Well, I think this is kind of the first year, in general, you're really starting to see this bifurcation because of transfer portal and NIL, right? I mean, like Texas Tech, I've watched it, right? Last year, Washington State played Tech and beat them at home, but Tech has a lot of money to spend, and they're able to get a lot of really good players and keep their players on their roster, probably more importantly. And so you can see where that starts to create issues for like a team like Oregon State that maybe doesn't have the same impact in NIL, and the roster does get, some of the roster leaves in transition in the offseason, or you're able to recruit the same way. And, I think Oregon State and Washington State stays in the same regard. You're trying to figure out what your identity is in this new kind of landscape. And I think that's really tough. I think it's less, not that it's less on Coach Bray, he's the head coach, right? But, there's some real challenges there that they have to face. I think the hard part for everybody is that, say, for a program like Oregon State, it just happens so fast. I mean, think about, these were, giant killers at times, right? Like they were always a tough out on the field. And to see this iteration this year where they just have really struggled, I think it's a tough pill to swallow for people that really follow that team. But I will say the place where coaching matters is preparation and penalties and preparedness. Like those things are not a talent issue, right? So that's something they got to clean up quickly.
We're talking to Alex Brink, former Coug, who is with us here on the Rip City Drive. I mean, you can compare and contrast, but are you seeing some of the same type of challenges at Washington State, who was in basically the same boat the Beavers were in when the Pac-12 disbanded?
Yeah, it's very similar. Washington State's got 70-plus new players, an entire new coaching staff, 2 new systems. They're trying to break in a new quarterback. Like, especially, this day and age when, you don't have the resources to buy good players to come in, then, you're going to struggle at times. I think that's what, Washington State's they're facing is some of those challenges for sure. I do think they're a good football team. I think, this last week's game against North Texas is not a great indicator of maybe who they could be. They were a victim of, not even a victim. They were the result of poor execution and turnovers on the road. If you turn the football over on the road, you're going to lose big, and they did that in a big way. And so, I think Washington State and Oregon State, yes, are in similar boats, and the challenges they face are, probably different from, a number of programs that are, in more established conferences or have better resources or whatever it may be.
All right, Alex, you mentioned the Cougs, and I'm going to ask you, what happened against North Texas? Was it just simply a fact of the turnovers? The way I read it is, they go in, you turn it over, and then it becomes a real snowball of a problem, and North Texas took full advantage. I don't know if it's indicative of how bad the Cougs are, but those turnovers really, bit them, when they had a chance to get back in the game. Is that what played out?
Yeah, I think, any way you slice it, it's a bad loss, and there's no doubt about it. But I do think they're a better football team than the way that score ended up. And, I'll point to kind of the example of, late in the second half, 8 minutes or first half, 8 minutes left in the first half, it's a 14-3 ball game. They've thrown 2 interceptions. They had an offensive possession that ended in a field goal when they're inside the 10-yard line. They had one of the interceptions was thrown when they're on North Texas's side of the 50, right? So they're moving the football offensively. And they had given up a touchdown their first drive defensively, but then gotten 3 stops in a row. So you kind of felt like, at least in that moment, that, hey, this team has a chance to weather this storm, right? It wasn't all bad. But then, just 3 egregious errors in a row. Running back fumbles on his own, 10-yard line or so. Immediately North Texas scores. You go 3 and out the next drive, and you drop the snap on the punt, and they immediately score again. And then the next drive, your backup quarterback fumbles an exchange, and they score again. So basically 21 points in the span of about 4 minutes. And now all of a sudden it's a rout. And when it's a rout on the road, it's nearly impossible to come back from at that point. And so, it really snowballed in a big way. And so I'm looking forward to Washington State this week. They play the Apple Cup. It's a highly emotional game at home. It's probably the best thing that could have happened to that team following a loss like North Texas.
All right, the Apple Cup. What are your thoughts going into this game? I know that the Apple Cup means a lot to you, and you had great success in this as a player, but how do you feel about the squad going in after that loss to North Texas?
I think they're going to be really motivated. I think a lot of them, like I mentioned, 70 new players, most of them have never seen that stadium in Pullman full and rocking and really a really special place, in my opinion. And for this Apple Cup, that thing is sold out. There's going to be a lot of UW, a lot of WSU fans. I mean, it is going to be a fantastic atmosphere, as good as you'll find in college football. And for a lot of these players, I think it's going to excite them. Like when they get out there and they see the different energy in that town and what it's like, I think that can be a pretty powerful elixir, for a team that's looking for some juice. And so I'm excited for them. I mean, Washington's a good football team. They've made some big upgrades in the offseason. Jed Fish is kind of known for remaking rosters, and they got a great quarterback, Damon Williams, a really good running back in Jonah Coleman. So offensively, they're going to be a challenge. You hope that Washington State offensively, they got some quarterback questions, and they find an identity. I mean, there's some players on that roster that can make plays. They got to find ways to get them the ball, and they got to be consistent. And ultimately, I mean, this is tales all the time. You got to protect the football, and I think they learned a valuable lesson last week.
Alex, we got a unique game on Saturday, a 9:00 kick in Salt Lake City with Utah and Texas Tech, which could be a preview of the Big 12 championship. And it's interesting because Utah's got one of the best offensive lines with great tackle play in the country, and then Texas Tech right now through the first few weeks, top-rated defensive line, and they put a lot of money through NIL into that area of their team. Utah always tough at home, but what are your thoughts here? It should be a good one.
I think it's going to be a great game. I mean, high-powered offense, with Texas Tech. I think Utah's, they're kind of remade their offensive side of the football a little bit also. You mentioned the offensive line for Utah. Against, I think a pretty good defensive front for Texas Tech. I'm just probably back to the old Pac-10, Pac-12 days, but, man, it doesn't get better than Kyle Whittingham, and Utah at home when, Rice Eccles is popping. That place is a really difficult place to play. So, if I'm handicapping it, that's where I think a little bit of the juice goes, because Utah is just is so tough in that environment.
All right, what are your thoughts on, the early play of Arch Manning? I mean, from what you've seen, what's your take from his play, which has been uneven at best?
Well, I think he's got to get better, and I think he would tell you the same thing. And I think, I think we've talked about it before. A little bit of everybody's kind of outside looking at perspective is based on, some really unfair expectations put on Arch Manning heading into this season, right? For anybody out there that voted him on a Heisman ballot or, talked about him being the number 1 overall draft pick next year, that was so misguided, right? This is a young man that had started, 3 football games at most at the collegiate level, played a pretty low level high school football, coming out of Tennessee. I think he's a good player. I think the expectations put on him are unrealistic, and he needs to be allowed to develop, right? And into the player he can be, instead of being compared to his uncles.
Alex Brink from E4 Sports, our college football and NFL insider. All right, unfortunate news in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow going down. He's going to be out, maybe for the rest of the year with that turf toe. I want to start with this. Did you ever have turf toe? I've never had it, but it doesn't sound bad. But from the guys I've talked to that have experienced it, said it's incredibly painful.
Yeah, I've never had turf toe, but it's also the most misleading name for an injury ever, right? It's a very painful injury. It's it's relatively debilitating. You can't walk with it when it's really serious, So I think any sort of foot injury is a problem because this is the most obvious thing. You're putting your feet down every step. I'm putting my feet down, and if I'm wearing cleats and I'm running fast, I'm doing that's such an issue. And so it's, I do think it's kind of laughable that turf toe sounds kind of silly compared to what it is.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. Now with Jake Browning, what's the message you give to a backup quarterback when they're going to step into a larger role? And it could be a situation where he plays the rest of the year. How do you coach that? What do you tell him? What are some of the things that you want him to focus on, knowing that he's got to take over the team, but he's not Joe Burrow.
Well, Browning's a pro, man. He's had success in the limited time that he's had to, play behind Burrow, and Burrow's had his own injury issues, right? Like along the way. So, Browning's got experience. I mean, shoot, this is a guy that took UW to the national championship. Like, he is, and he's been a high level player since he was in high school. Like, if anybody, it kind of reminds me of Chase Daniel, right? Who forever was a backup, for the Chiefs and for a number of teams in the league. Like, and he was always productive. And, I just think there's guys that are kind of built for it, right? That, not that they like being the backup, but that are suited for it. And, Jake Browning seems like that type of player. He may not be as physically gifted, say, as Joe Burrow, but from an operations standpoint, he can absolutely get it done. And he's shown that, I think, in the limited time.
Alex Brink is here. We're talking a little football. How patient do you think Ben Johnson should be with Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, right? Because, like, where do you turn, for one? Two, it's, you're talking about an number one overall draft pick, too. And then you've got, I think Ben Johnson is, he's getting his own system put in there. So there's this balance of, like, all right, I got to make sure I get, there's a growth period of getting guys on the same page, quarterbacks, probably first and foremost, but everybody. And so I think Caleb Williams is probably trying to find his footing a little bit, too. I mean, you and I have talked about this for years, was, Caleb Williams was going to need to find success in the NFL kind of in between the guardrails, right? Like he's such a unique off-schedule player, but you never could tell in that Lincoln Riley offense at USC if he could play on time and in rhythm and all those things. And I think he has struggled with that, and that's been a huge issue. And the hope was a guy like Ben Johnson could kind of bring that out of him because he's got the ability for it. I think you got to give him more time. I think you got to get through this year and see what he can do, and then give yourself a chance in the offseason, to hopefully kind of build off of that.
And coming out of the draft, a lot of the same things that you had concerns about, running plays on schedule, being on time and on target, not holding onto the football. Like some of those have been issues thus far in his time with the Bears. And, which of those is the hardest to coach out of a player? Is it holding onto the football? Is it running plays on schedule? Like, how difficult is it as a coach to kind of drive those type of habits out of a quarterback?
Yeah, it's kind of the playing on schedule piece of it, right? Because when guys have had a lot of success playing off schedule, right, they can make a lot of big plays. Like you make a ton of big plays, and you kind of are like, well, if my number one read isn't as clean as I want it to be, then I'm going to go make something happen, with my feet or off schedule or whatever. Problem is in the NFL is, sometimes that first read doesn't look super clean, but it's the best one you got, right? And, when you pass, I used to have coaches that say, never pass up an open receiver in the first one, right? And so, because you just don't know what's left over. And athletically, you're not as good, you're not as good, or you're not as dominant maybe as you were in college. So if you pass up your first or second read hoping to make a big play off schedule, you just flat out may not be able to do it because the athletes are better. And so I think that's probably the hardest thing, in my opinion, to kind of get guys to buy into.
How much fun was it to watch Baker Mayfield last night making plays and leading his team down the field to get the game-winning touchdown? What's been the big change for Baker in Tampa? What are you seeing that's allowed him to take his game to the next level? Playing like a top 10 quarterback in the league, which is awesome.
I think Baker Mayfield's one of my favorite football players out there, to be honest with you. I mean, think back to remember that game he went and played with the Rams, right? Like showed up on a Thursday or whatever, and then played on Sunday and won the game. Like just the coolest thing. Like I think that I think what makes Baker Mayfield so good is his confidence level. I mean, his talent level. Like he throws it as good as anybody, and he's a good enough athlete to make plays. But his confidence is so dang high, right? And he's just able to, he's pretty unflappable in that regard. Like bad things happen, he's able to bounce back. Think about the challenge of playing quarterback in general in the NFL. Most of these guys have a hard time. If I'm a high-level draft pick and I go to a bad organization, they have a really hard time pulling themselves out of it and, taking advantage of the next opportunity, right? Like you can count on one hand the number of guys that are able to do it, whether it's the Sam Darnolds of the world or the Geno Smiths of the world. And Baker Mayfield's probably the best of all of them in that regard. And I think a lot of that has to do with his mentality, and so just have loved watching his career and his ability to do that. And that mentality he takes to Tampa, where it's actually a pretty good roster and a good coach when he shows up there. And, that's what you hope that guy gets out of college. That's not the reality of the NFL draft, unfortunately, for most guys. And so I'm just happy that he got that opportunity.
Yeah, it's so cool. All right, one more football question for you. My Denver Broncos lost to the Colts this past weekend. They actually had the game won, but a late flag on a field goal attempt pushed the Colts 15 yards up closer, and the guy made the kick, and they get the win. Now, the call on the Broncos was that of leverage, and it's a 15-yard penalty where you're putting your hand or using the player in front of you to get any type of advantage to hoist yourself up to help block the kick. Now, the call was proper because they called it to the letter of the law. What I'm curious about for you as a player, do you want the refs to call the game the same from start until finish, or would you prefer that there's a little more leeway and allow the guys to play at the end of the game? How do you see it as a player?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in that specific instance, when you're talking about like the leverage call on a kick, I do think you got to keep that one pretty tight, right? Because blocking a kick is obviously like such an important part of the game in those moments. And if a team has an advantage that they're not supposed to have in that instance, like I think that creates too much inconsistency. So I'm kind of the nature that things like that you keep pretty tight. I would argue sometimes that, whether it's hand fighting on, downfield with receivers and DBs, or maybe a little bit more physicality at the line of scrimmage, like, yeah, maybe you're letting those things go kind of later in the game or in certain situations, I guess, but kind of the old let guys play sort of mentality. But I think when it comes to things like, the letter of the law and like kicks, I think you got to keep that pretty tight.
All right, Alex, tell me about what you guys are doing at eForce right now with speed and strength training.
We have some awesome programs, for young athletes that are looking to improve their speed and strength, injury prevention, their quickness and agility. We offer that at 3 different facilities here in the metro area, out in Beaverton off Allen Boulevard, over in Milwaukee, off of McLaughlin, and then now up in the Vancouver area. So if you just go to eforcesports.com, you click on the speed and strength tab, you can see all our group training programs. It's for all athletes, all ages, male and female. You can see private training options, some really cool things going on for young athletes. And we're open 6 days a week, morning and afternoon and evening training time. So an opportunity for anybody to find a way to get in and improve.
That's awesome. Alex Brink is our college football and NFL insider, joins us every week. And Alex, enjoy the Apple Cup, my friend. I know it's got to be interesting for you going in because you never lost to the Dogs. Is that correct?
3-1. Actually, I would love to say 4-0, but I had my junior year. We had a tight one, lost by 3 points. I think 4 points maybe.
Yeah, but 3-1 in that game. That's got to feel pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I love playing the Huskies, man. Loved it.
All right, buddy. Well, we appreciate it, man. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, those quarterbacks don't forget their records in the rivalry series. So Apple Cup and Civil War coming up this weekend, which is great. Telephone number 503-248-0620. Love talking ball with Alex Brink, and he'll join us every week throughout the entire football season. And I'll reach out. Brian O, Fox Sports Radio will join us again this week as well as we get ready for another weekend of ball, which is awesome. All right, 503-248-0620. Make sure you join me Friday out in Gresham for the Rip City Rally. I've got more details on that coming up in just a moment. And also Sunday at Pioneer Courthouse Square for the Rip City reunion with Damian Lillard, who will be there to address the crowd. All right, the Rip City Rally is going to come up on Friday. It's going to run 4 to 6. I'll be on site broadcasting the Rip City Drive 3 to 6. And it's going to be at the Gresham Arts Plaza at 401 Northeast 2nd Street. In fact, let's go out there right now. Good friend of mine, Brett Davidson, is listening. Brett, what's up, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Chad, you're going to be in Gresham.
Yes, I am. I'm going to be there on Friday from 3 until 6, my friend.
Well, I just might have to stop by and see. It's been a long time since you did that show in my classroom. You remember that all those years ago?
I do. I still have pictures from that day, and I still have the audio saved, and so I remember it fondly, and I had a great time. And I think the kids, from what I recall, had a good time watching the show in process.
They absolutely did. I don't know if they had as much fun as I did, but I'm still going at it, and I don't want to take too much more of your time.
How
but
many
hopefully
years?
I see you Friday.
How many years you been
What's
teaching
that?
now, Brett? How many years you been teaching?
Buddy, year 21 right now.
Gosh, that's so awesome, man. That's great. Did you ever think that you would be 21 years deep teaching?
I never did, and I also never thought I am driving currently. We could get a shout-out from you for the Barlow girls soccer team. My daughter's playing, so I'm headed to her game right now.
What's your daughter's name?
Elsa.
Elsa. All right, Barlow, man. Let's get it done. Where's the game going to be played?
We're at Franklin High School, so I'm about 5 minutes away. We're going to continue our win streak, and it's always good to hear you, buddy, and I hope to see you on Friday.
Are you excited about the Ducks this year?
Dude, what do you think?
They look great, man. They look better than last year right now.
Yes, but I've had my heart broken many times since I went there in 1998, so trying to pump the brakes a little bit. But, yeah, so far so good, and looking forward to a Beaver beatdown this week.
You got it, man. Well, hey, have fun at the soccer game, and stop by and see me on Friday, buddy.
Thanks. You're going to be by the fountain there, by the theater?
Yes, it'll be somewhere in that area. I don't have the exact location yet, but you won't be able to miss us.
I know it well. I'll see you, buddy. Take care.
You got it. There's Brett. 21 years in, teaching. Big Duck fan, big Blazer fan. I went out to his classroom, and I do remember it because I had a few hot takes about Neil Olshey at the time. And I want to say it was roughly around 2012, 2013. But it was good. I was just down at Cascade High School last week. Got a project I'm working on with those kids. Very nice. Very good. Brett's a good dude. 21 years of teaching. You're either really good and great at working with kids or you're insane. I'm not built to be able to handle that type of environment. It'd drive me crazy. That's why I respect teachers who've been able to hang in and do a good job for an extended period of time. Oh, my goodness. I did. I was at the school today. I was having a meeting with a couple of educators over at my daughter's school, and it's like, you just see the operation, what's going on. It's like, okay, I'm just not built for that. 503-248-0620. That is the telephone number. And looking forward to this weekend. Don't forget, Pioneer Courthouse Square on Sunday. It's the reunion rally for Damian Lillard, as he has a chance to come down and talk to the fans. He'll be there. We'll be celebrating his return. That's going to be on Sunday. And I checked the extended forecast, and the weather's going to be spectacular, just like it was on the golf course this morning. But very sad, I might add. The daylight, we're losing daylight right now. The sun did not rise until about roughly 6:51 this morning. So the days are getting shorter. Basketball season is right around the corner, and summertime is vanishing. It's not over yet, but it is vanishing. So the extended forecast, if we take a look at it for Friday, sunny, no clouds, 81 degrees. So the next few days, let's see here. Tomorrow, 81 and sunny. 78, mostly sunny on Thursday. Friday, 81 and sunny. Saturday, 80 and sunny. Sunday, oh, yay. Rain showers early with some sunshine later in the day. Hey-o! Welcome back, Dame. And that's that's got to be the proper way to welcome someone back to Portland, to make sure they get rained on. It's very annoying. Ah, crap. I didn't see that. That wasn't in the forecast earlier. Hope that changes. And then next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday look good. Thursday, some rain in the morning. Yeah, that's a sign of what's to come. And then right now, September 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th. Rain, 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 rain. All right. That's just the way it goes. That's the way it goes. Big thanks to the Godfather for joining us today and sharing his thoughts on Trent Bray. Also, Alex Brink. Remember, you can always podcast and listen live via our free iHeartRadio app. And be sure to check us out on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com and pull up our homepage, Rip City Radio 620. And you can always reach out to me on X, @ChadandRipCity, or you can text me direct whenever you want, 360-281-5473. I appreciate the interaction. I appreciate the feedback, any type of conversation. Love this time of year with the football. A lot of great storylines in football right now. And, things are still developing. We're not even through the first quarter of the season in the NFL. But I think with college football right now, we're starting to see some teams emerge. I thought Georgia's win at Tennessee was gutsy. They showed their toughness. I think Miami's been terrific. Oregon's looked great. LSU's been tough with their defense. I think Clemson and Texas are frauds. Yeah, it's going to be good. Good weekend. Big games, Apple Cup and Civil War all in the same weekend. And then we'll get Oregon and Penn State, which is going to be nice. Big thanks to Brendan Slaughter for engineering the program. You guys have a great night. I'll be back tomorrow with the Rip City Drive at 3 right here in your home of the Blazers, 620 Rip City Radio.